Everyone. I understand the coffee and conversations are really very interesting, but we really have something even better for you here. Our next session is about investment opportunities in water. And I really want to take a moment before we start with the session, to thank our session and knowledge partners for the same. I want to call out Rehive and Climake for this wonderful session which we have curated. Rehive has been very generously allowed us to use their research insights for the session, and Climake has helped us curate this session. So a quick introduction to our session partners. Shravan, who's also a co-founder of Climake. He has over 13 years of experience focused around mainstreaming sustainability, working with organizations across Asia and Europe, and developing national policies in India and Sri Lanka. Can I request you all to please, settle down because we are starting with the next session. So over to you, Shravan, I think, for the session.
For a minute or so, just to let everyone settle down. Will we start? Yeah? Okay. Super. Lovely to see all of you here. And first, a big thanks to IIC and NEEF Fund for inviting us to be knowledge partners for this session. I think generally, just this theme of emerging sectors is something which appeals to us a lot. We are well aware, I think all of us in this room, about how climate finance, climate action is pooled into very specific sectors. And it's great to see, traction and development in more emerging sectors, which is really what we need to get to. The session in the morning was amazing. I really took a lot away from it. But now we are talking about water and cooling after this, where it's a very different element on climate. It's climate adaptation. It's about how do we live against the effects that we're facing. It's a more daunting prospect to even tackle and to address, and also build the financing and investing case here. So that's what we kind of want to do today. Okay. I'll take you through a bit of a sector context, which our other knowledge partner, Rehive, has helped us in developing. But then after that is the main course I've already been having like a lot of really interesting chats with Neeraj already there. But we'll have entrepreneurs and a couple of investors who will then pepper this insights that I have given just to lay out the land with really specific insights and how they really see the sector. So yeah, I think everyone is aware of that, line, water everywhere and not a drop to drink. But rather than being a lament for an old sailor, that's a very similar situation that we're facing in cities and industries that we have in India today, and pretty much globally. And things just tend to be more acute when you're the most populous nation in the world. These are just some key data points that we have identified, and which really speak to the level and the volume of the problem that you face. Now, aside from all these things of how dependent we are on very transient types of water sources, how quality is an issue, and how gaps are so extant, is just this point. This point that water demand is supposed to be 2x water supply by 2030. And when we have looked at water as a sector, it's very government-driven. There is some private intervention into it. And mainly, most of that has been around conservation, monitoring, and so on. When you look at this data point, you have to answer the question on where is this, half of water which we need going to come from? Which is where the narrative is becoming around how do we actually, let's call it, make water. I mean, that is such a weird concept on its own. But this is fundamentally the scenario that we're dealing with, and that's what we are working on today. We are working on almost like what a lot of dystopian novels in the 80s, like your Mad Max movies, were basically talking about. We're kind of getting to a reality there a lot faster than what we expected down there. But I think one of the things about water, obviously, is it's so necessary, it's so needed, and where there is a very clear wake-up call from different sectors and different industries on doing something about it. Now, you're going to hear a lot more of this from our panelists, but it's a very interesting time in water as an investable sector today. And I think one of the most interesting things has definitely been the work of government and of government action. Now, water has been, if you look at, water, municipal supplies, desalination plants, wastewater, it has a very large government footprint into that. But we do know the problems when it comes about financing government projects in that way. We do know that going back to this point of needing double the amount of water that we need by 2030, it's going to require new innovations. It's going to require new solutions. That's not something we equate with government sort of institutions and government assets being run. And that's a change that we're seeing also. We're seeing government also starting to work with the private sector a lot more. We're starting to see municipalities such as, I think Suez and Veolia have started working with water utilities in Bangalore, for example, to actually improve the operation of those things, to reduce leakage, to make it more self-sustaining, to make it more self-sufficient, to actually ensure that there is efficiency built into this whole system. And the thing about I think it was one thing which we see about a lot of adaptation solutions, but also around something like water, which is, in a sense, it's also a very shared resource with everyone. It has a big government footprint. It has a big government action. And we definitely need government direction to make any sort of dent into that we can. And that's what we're seeing. And that's what we're getting. From the basics of like the Water Act giving regulations on water quality and just how effluent discharge is just managed to a particular level, we're now getting to this whole thing about gray recycling becoming potable. We were supposed to have Amrit of Indra today. He couldn't make it for personal reasons. But he's a fabulous case of a very scalable solution, which is basically making wastewater into potable water. Because if you think about industries and their requirements of what they have to do with wastewater, it generally goes to just tree plantation. It goes to off-process-based things, where a lot of your process activities still require virgin water sources. And it's this whole, we're kind of almost backs against the wall, and we really can't move back and say, look, we have to change the way things are happening. And I think what we have seen definitely, and because we have spent a bit of time also researching in the space, is the role of what government can actually do as an enabler. And one of the sectors, for example, that we have looked at a lot is around waste and circularity. And we are seeing a very similar trend of how government works as an enabler to actually incentivize the sector. You're starting to see more of these services being provided to private industry. You're seeing the incentive for new innovations to actually get adopted because of this change of relationship. So this is the sort of like the call that we're making, that there's a lot of different things happening around how water is actually increasing in consciousness. And it's not just a very government-based solution that we have to look at. As part of the scenario setting, and this is thanks to the work of Rehive, you can really look at innovations in 3 areas. It's about what is the source of water, what do we do with water during its use, and what do we do after the use of water. And this is where your universe and your landscape of water solutions basically come from and where they actually operate. We have kind of looked to also identify certain key solutions and areas around this. We're going to hear from someone in rainwater harvesting today. But even at the source of water, which is basically reaching that 2x multiple of supply which we need to get to, I think all of us are aware of water-to-air solutions which are really emerging. Desalination is something which is in a very interesting space because that goes back to the line that I said at the start. There's a lot of water everywhere, but it's not sufficient to drink. But that's what's emerging as an option and a solution. And traditionally, desalination is not a new solution, but it's coming to this stage where the economics of it, the viability of it is just getting to make more sense because our issues are much more pressing around it. And just to give you some idea on, we've done a small snapshot on atmospheric water generation and rainwater harvesting. And 2 companies I think a lot of us would be aware of is Uravu and Maitri, who both use this in very different ways, where Uravu focuses on providing bottling of water solutions, primarily to industrial and commercial establishments. Maitri is doing it from a very much of selling these units in a way that is used by industries. So you're starting to see a very water as a service model evolving, and you're starting to see this whole model around selling as equipment and infrastructure evolving. And it's just throwing up a lot more opportunities and a lot more ways in which we can actually tackle this situation. We're going to hear from Retas today, and I won't get too much into this, but when you really look at the research and the reliance we have on groundwater, it's really scary. It is not a great scenario that we have. And how do we actually solve for that is fundamentally, a big question. And I've already been prepping him for a few questions, but one of the things that shocked me most was there are significant mandates around rainwater harvesting. And in Chennai, where I come from, for example, rainwater harvesting is mandated in every new construction. There's only an 8% penetration of rainwater harvesting in industries, in any sort of industry or large-scale residential setup or commercial setup today. And we rely on the monsoons. We are aware of that, but we don't really seem to tap into it too much further. We've also done a universe of global companies working in this space. And this is obviously something which we are very aware of what's happening in other sectors, where the evolution of new solutions emerging globally and us then contextualizing to the Indian context and evolving is something that we have seen repeatedly over and over on an extensive basis. What is interesting is the number of business models that have potential to actually evolve for us. The level of technologies that can be utilized. Desiccation has been probably the most prominent thing we're aware of when it comes to atmospheric water, for example. But it just shows the amount of potential opportunity that's there. And it also shows white spaces that are available for new innovations to evolve. One of the things, obviously, about water is being such a nascent sector, we're going to see companies across the spectrum, early stage scale and growth, initial innovation, and pre-commercialization. And it just throws up a lot more opportunities. One of the things I really do like about adaptation solutions is, unlike mitigation, where still people think it's a choice to say, I want to reduce emissions, you can't do that in adaptation. If you don't have water, you don't have water. So you're going to be forced to actually basically evolve these things to actually pick up and grow. This is during water opportunities, which is at consumption stage, is probably the one where we're most aware of. We have heard of VGOT, Digital Pani, FluxGen, measuring, tracking, just ensuring leakage prevention and using that as an enabler for efficiency to really evolve. This is something which has been well established like an industry. It's emerging significantly in residential setups. It's a space where the nature of technology is well validated. It's not really about a question mark on what can actually work. It's about how do we actually increase adoption and how do we increase scale. And there's a lot of incentives coming towards this as well. And I think one of the things I remember speaking to someone, I think a couple of weeks ago, was that the price of water is fundamental for actually defining this. I think in a lot of households, when people rent households and so on, they don't pay for water. So the incentive for knowing what the cost of water is and that actually hitting your pocket, if that is removed, your incentive for that actually has to change. So there's also a shift in a behavior beyond just ensuring the adoption of a solution, ensuring technology is available, that needs to be solved for as well. And here, there's a couple of companies that we thought to highlight. VGOT is something I think a lot of us are familiar with, which is the usage, the traceability, and the minimization of water consumption in residential, commercial, and industrial complexes using IoT sensors, just providing and solving for that whole data problem to address leakage and prevention of loss of water. And then AquaNurture was a very interesting solution we thought to highlight, because the focus around aquaculture starts throwing up this big unknown, but the largest part of water consumption, which is around agriculture. Shreyasi is going to be speaking a bit more about that. I put the load on you to do that, because that's something they have looked at a lot in Synapse as well, the role of water consumption in agriculture, because at that point of time, it starts blurring the line between, does it come as an agriculture focus or a water focus? But when it's a shared resource, it deserves to be looked at here as well. And similarly, it's a space where, even though I think the maturity of the technologies which are available is established, we don't have too much of a problem in knowing what the question is. It still really shows potential opportunity in terms of hardware, in terms of the business models. One of the things, obviously, has been this whole shift beyond just a one-time sale to a recurring aspect. And the moment that you're doing continuous, traceability and quality monitoring, the focus actually ends up becoming around how do you actually build recurring and continuous models to actually ensure utilization, ensure monitoring, and basically figure out a business model which actually makes a lot more sense for you as a consumer, for you as a provider, and for the consumer as well. And it also has white spaces for innovation. We have to throw the word AI in there as well, because obviously that's flavor of the month, and it's going to be for a while as well. And the last one we want to talk about, obviously, is what happens after water consumption. After water consumption, what do we do around that whole space? Wastewater from sewage, from industrial, from domestic sources. One of the biggest problems that we have is we have such low capacity compared to what we're actually generating. It's only about 25% of the water that we actually, 30%, I think, of the water that we actually, and sewage and wastewater that we actually generate that actually gets treated. And that's a huge source which gets lost, which can actually be reclaimed back towards what we need to do. And this element, which has traditionally been done either at an industrial level for just meeting compliance or at a municipal level by government, really speaks to the need for more private investment and private participation in this whole space. Because this problem is not necessarily around, again, the gap of technology. It's around the utilization and the deployment and the scale of such solutions to actually be picked up and made effective. And this is something that we're also seeing where government, again, working with private enterprise to provide more of these services for them to actually pick up and adopt further. A company which we really like, frankly, is Indra, which focuses on treating industrial and non-industrial wastewater streams. And this is obviously a super complex thing, as you can imagine, because the moment you look at industrial activities and how you actually end up treating that, the complexities with chemicals and your metals and all that you need to do, what you need to do becomes a lot more intense and a lot more significant, and also a lot more tailored to the specific industry. But what we really think is really fascinating about them is this whole way they made it into a modular setup, and ultimately that end output being a fairly portable source of water, where it actually can go into key processes again. So it is actually a higher footprint potential of making a dent and an impact in terms of recycling water. This is a sector where there's a company that also we have looked at a lot, which looks at membrane filtration. It's an absolutely fascinating company where they are able to basically trap 50 different types of pollutants which are there in the water, which really talks to the amount of development which is needed for just the ability for treated water to become more prominent. Now, this is something which is definitely a wide space, and because it already has, especially from an industrial standpoint, some compliance element and compliance angle towards it, it becomes a huge opportunity sector as well. And just have a look at the white space area. That is an extensive list of potential solutions that you can actually solve for. And this is what we are already starting to see and what is already emerging into this place. Okay. So this is just to give you a bit of the landscape of water solutions from our perspective. And I was just looking at some of the data points that we looked at. Until 2020 to 2023, only 1.7% of climate investments, equity investments, went to water. Now we're starting to see that change slowly, because in the last couple of years, there's been a lot more traction, a lot more growth and scale. But rather than me talking to you about it, we are going to get some really interesting panelists to come on board. So Neeraj, Shailesh, and Shreyasi, could you please come and join us up here? Which is a more cozy affair. I do quite like that. But, and we have a mix of an entrepreneur, Neeraj, and investors from Shailesh and Shreyasi. Neeraj, I'm going to start with you. Since you're basically carrying the entrepreneur hat for the entire water sector here, can you give us a bit of an idea of what your company does, but also use that as an opportunity to talk about how do you see the universe of water solutions, and if you can touch upon a bit of the emergence of private solutions, within that universe?
Uh, Thank you for giving us this opportunity, and thank you, IIC. So, I represent Retas. Retas is basically a Sanskrit word which means droplets of rainwater, and that is the whole area where we are engaged at. So, primarily, we focus on rainwater harvesting, also on the stormwater management. So, what we have tried to do is that we have come up with innovative solutions which can store the rainwater and make it reusable for non-potable purposes. So, just for an example, let's say if you're working for an industry, uh, we help them in conserving the rainwater, storing it, and so that they can use it for landscape irrigation. Some of the industries have also experienced the efficiency of these water in their production processes. We can talk about it at a later stage, but we help our clients in storing the rainwater and making it reusable for non-drinkable purposes. This is what we primarily do as of now. Talking about the whole water sector, Shravan, of late, after 2019, and because there has been so much of government focus uh, after carving out a new department to monitor the groundwater measurements and assessment by Jal Shakti Ministry, there has been a whole lot of drivers which are helping companies like us to gain a lot of traction in the market. So we are very hopeful that there is soon going to be an inflection point in the next 3 to 4 years. A lot of foreign companies are started investing in India through joint ventures, through direct presence. So we are very hopeful that this particular sector is going to kind of expand and amplify very soon.
Super. Thank you. Tracy, over to you. If you can just obviously introduce Synapse and what you do, and also talk a bit about how water plays into your way of thinking, and how do you see the space broadly?
Hello, I'm Sreyashi. I represent Synapses. So Synapses is a platform that supports startups in the climate change space. So the way we work is we set up as a not-for-profit incubator where we get to work with the startups very early stage, and then we also have a seed fund, and we are also raising a venture fund at this point where we get to invest in these startups. So through the seed fund, we invest in startups at the stage of technology validation, and through the venture fund, we want to support startups that are in the process of scaling up. So at Synapses, we are interested in looking at sectors such as energy transition, regenerative agriculture, circular economy, and we now added also looking at health as another sector of importance under climate adaptation. So water, we have been looking at water from not directly as water, but from energy or as well as an agriculture standpoint, because to look at agriculture consumes almost 80 to 85% of the nation's fresh water. So we are looking at technologies which can help technologies or startups that are interested in preserving the soil moisture, promoting regenerative agriculture practices which can lastly help in conservation of water, as well as also practicing water efficient ways people can use water. So also as part of circularity, we are looking at different circular loops which can help in water conservation. So that's about it.
Super. Thanks. That was quite interesting. Shailesh, you come with your gray hair shows you have a lot of experience, obviously, but you come with a lot of experience and a lot of, I think, hats as well. Could you give a perspective on, obviously, the lens that you look at from Climate Angels, but I think even more broadly, how do you see the water sector as an investable sector?
Thanks for having me here. So at Climate Angels, we have done 2 water investments. I think one Shravan talked about was Indra Water. We joined their Series A round. We also have done investment in Digital Pani. So Climate Angel, as the name suggests, we are very hardcore, laser focused on climate. And when I say climate, that means it's not something because of carbon, everything. Because when we talk climate globally, people think of carbon removal. Like say you talk to any Western company, the climate means carbon, right? In India, and I think global south, we take a little broader view, which is climate is basically environment, right? And especially when you have air pollution, you have plastic pollution, you have water contamination, so there's a much more broader world. And I see climate is essentially engineering problem. Basically, all the companies, and it's not that the water doesn't have big companies. You have VA, Wowtech, multiple companies there who have built billion-dollar business. But those businesses were built when there were no resource constraints. There was no regulation issue, there was no water scarcity, there was no pollution, there was no effluent. And I think you need new wave of engineering companies to solve this, because the company which have done what we have seen so far, we'll see that mean the company which will need to solve now. So look at the company like Indra Water. The opportunity is not coming because of anything else, but more because the regulations are getting tightened. Now every textile company, every pharma company, when they want to release water, they have to ensure that the water is as pure as could be, right? And that creates opportunity. Then you have constraint about the land. Then you have the constraint of the sizes. So Indra gets those containers, they deploy it, and it's not that getting government contracts. Unilever is deploying them in India, Indonesia, Tata Group is deploying them. So we see water as a very significant thing. In fact, I see in the humans touch environment 4 ways, like which is housing, transportation, food, and our energy. And everything has what you call water in it. So there's a lot of opportunity there, and there's a lot of engineering there. So I think we are very excited at, not because there's some slogan has to be done, but I see as a what we call technologies for the resource constant world. That's what I use, because the resources are no longer as they were, say 200 years back, but resources are not there now. So we need better, faster, cheaper. Classical venture world.
Okay. No, that was really good. And I really like the point you mentioned. And also you touched upon it, Tracy, that water is very cross-cutting. So looking at it as a sector on its own, you realize it has a lot more touch points getting into it. Neeraj, going back to you, water, as you know, what we have also heard about is the government's hand has a strong role to play. Rainwater harvesting, it's mandatory in certain places. There are subsidies available in certain places. You have reached great scale. Could you give us an idea on how that scale was achieved and what really was the role of these government policies? Were they effective enough? Were they actually a driver? And yeah.
So it's a very interesting fact that you brought out, Shravan. So when we started, there were a lot of questions that how can there be a business around fresh water? Unless there is a mandate given by the government, which might help you in getting a headway to your client space, you cannot really build or scale a business around it. So this is a question which we have been facing since our beginning. So, and interestingly, the way we have achieved our scale is that we have never worked with any of the government clients so far, and all our clients has been private. So government, and especially the current government, they are not into execution. They are primarily into policy forming and also kind of helping you, guide that these are the sectors which needs implementing innovative, efficient rainwater harvesting systems. And these are the sectors or areas, the locations which are very water stressed. These are like hotspots for your product and services. And so that you should focus on providing solutions, customized solutions for all such customers. So while government can help you bring out those policies, but there has to be an effort from the innovators and from the businesses to provide a sustainable, or I should say very efficient system around it. Unless you do that, there would not be any scalable business which you can make. This is the first thing. Second is, see, we are into an infrastructure space. And if you are bringing out a product where you are catering to an infrastructure, you will have to demonstrate very strong execution skills. Unless you have a very, very strong design and execution skills, nobody is going to take you seriously. And rightly so, because let's say if you are coming up with a new product and if you are not able to give the customer the value for it, the customers will also sooner or later, the interest will die. So I would say that while the government, through its policies and interventions, can help you get an entry to your client space, but as an entrepreneur, you'll have to have a very, very strong execution team, a delivery team, so that you can at least demonstrate the efficiency and the value that you are going to offer to your client.
Okay. So what is driving customers to actually adopt solutions? You had a very interesting anecdote, which I think is really interesting to share here, but I think that's one part of it, but also what are the type of customers predominantly that you have? Because you mentioned about industrial, commercial. Generally, what's the spread that you're seeing?
Yeah. So about 60-65% of the customers whom we offer is industries. Rest of them are infrastructure companies. So infrastructure will vary right from highways to airports to railway stations. Uh, and it's a very interesting fact that I like to share with you is when we go and work in South and West, people use our system because of the commercial benefit that they are deriving out of it. So let's say if we have installed our system in a factory in West, that factory is going to use that rainwater for 3 months, 3 to 4 months in a year, and it saves a lot more cost for them because water slowly is becoming a resource for which you are going to pay, right? And if I just give you a comparison between the commercial cost of water vis-a-vis the domestic cost of water, the commercial cost of water is rising exponentially now. So people in West and in South, they use our system because of the commercial benefit that they are deriving out of it. Mandate will, let's say if there is a mandate of installing rainwater harvesting system in a factory, and that mandate is getting fulfilled by putting up a 1 lakh liter tank, but the customers comes to us and say that, no, you install a tank of 5 lakh liter because I want to use the maximum amount of rainfall that we are receiving. Also thanks to that sporadic pattern of rainfall that we are receiving these days because of the climate change and whatever we are witnessing. So the demographic the dividend that we are deriving from West and South is pretty much different than in North. In North, users want to put their system for mandate. Also, because of the huge water flooding issues that they solve, that they face in North, we are helping them address those water flooding issues, and these are the reasons why people are adopting our technology.
Super fascinating, and it's nice when you hear different regional reasons why people actually buy things, but par for the course. Shreyasi, with agriculture and water has many different touch points, like Neeraj alluded to, erratic rainfall, and we're seeing that obviously with climate change as well, where rainfall patterns are changing, quantities are evolving and changing. And then there's also the other side that I think about almost 80% of fresh water is consumed by agriculture. So what is sort of like, and I'm sure you are evolving a thesis as you shape up the fund focus as well, but how are you looking at the nature of solutions that you expect to touch into? Because these are two very different things. One is making water available, the other one is doing something with water being more efficient.
Right. So as part of regenerative agriculture, our thesis is around basically conserving the soil moisture. So when just not soil moisture, also like practicing natural farming, then looking at whether mulching, how do you put carbon back into the soil. So all of it we are looking at reducing the fertilizer consumption. So all of that has an indirect effect on the water consumption that's happening. So we are looking at from that lens that how agriculture can play regenerative agriculture play a very big role in the final, saving of the water. So that has been also, we invested in this company, KhetWorks, which is into small, portable pumps, which can help in promoting so that overconsumption of, that happens due to irrigation, constant irrigation, doesn't happen. So those are the kind of, technologies that we have looked at, or as I said, regenerative agriculture has been one of our focus areas, and so those agriculture is a way for us to work on water.
Okay, no, super. And given obviously agriculture and smallholder farmers, those two things always come in conversation. How do you see the nature of water solutions going there? Because for example, like with Uravu, they started with making, they made these water desiccant add to water solutions, but the product they sell is packaged bottled water. Maitri is doing something different like that. So do you see there's an evolution even in the form of how water is provided, even at the agricultural level?
So just not agriculture. So we obviously have worked with, because of our work in the acceleration space of working with startups. So we worked with Uravu as part of one of our, you know, accelerator programs. And the thing is, what we are looking at, if it is for, you know, portability, it has to be cost effective. And if it is to look at access, then we need to look at a like price that is, you know, which is going to be you know, common man can actually pay that price for drinking water, is the kind of solutions that we are looking at for from a portable standpoint. And we're also looking at like how grey water recycling and all of that can also happen. So we have looked at different technologies which can help in, you know, recycling of water, then algal technologies which can, you know, help in water recycling. So, and also in terms of agriculture, how do you put, you know, regenerate the bore wells that have become non-functional today? So what are the kind of technologies that are existing there, and, you know, what are the solutions that are coming up? That is also a very interesting point of, you know, using the rainwater harvested to back to improve the water table
Yeah.
under the soil. Yeah.
Okay, super. Shailesh, to you. I kind of want to touch upon a bit around, just more broadly speaking, on how you have seen, you know, traditionally sectors which have had a traditionally large government footprint. How has that sort of been evolving and how that's been changing? And more from the mindset of how an investor thinks about those spaces. Would an investor still be comfortable of investing in a sector which has a large government footprint, or is it something that they expect to change a bit more in terms of private sector participation? You can take it more from a broader perspective, or even focus upon water, if you would like.
I think that's a pretty interesting point. As we see, the governments keep on getting involved more and more. See, as an investor, generally, everybody wants to avoid where the government is kind of client. What he mentioned, right, as for obvious reasons, right? It's very complicated because the payments, you know, there are a lot of complications. But so generally, when we talk of the investment, right, we always talk of entrepreneurs and markets. We say great entrepreneurs meet great market, magic happens. Great entrepreneurs meet a bad market, they die. Or market always wins. In India, I also had policy. So if you have great entrepreneur, great policy, a very big example is payment space in India. India is number one the world in the digital payment space because the policy was playing along with what you call money and the entrepreneurs. So market was there for sure. Great entrepreneurs came, great market, great policy. But where the policy becomes bigger, you see Vodafone, right? The disaster happens. So you can't ignore policy. And fact of the matter is, majority of things, government policy is there. It will always remain there. The idea is where the revenue is going to come from. Whether my revenue is going to come from the government contracts or PSU contracts, or my revenue is going to come from the private enterprises, right? Essentially, because with all due respect to government, because they're so bad in so many things, so many new sectors emerging. Like education exists, whole edutech exists because the education, which is part of the government, is so bad, right? Healthcare the same. So same way I look at the water also, because of the water is broken and now is something is essentially broken. We see a lot of opportunity. Why the companies like Indra Water? Because the companies like Unilever need a solution. Taj Hotel need a solution, and there's no solution available. So the policy is kind of necessity, and this is playing along, which is a good thing. So I think we will see these three as three frameworks: the policy, great market, great entrepreneur. So there might be great policy. If there's no market, nothing can be done, right? We see so many things that government has been pushing. Like I will say example of cold storage chains, right?
Yeah.
I think there's a favorable policy for 100 years now. Well, say 30 years, 40 years. Lot of subsidy, everything.
Yeah.
Because the need for cold storage is not there in India. People don't realize that. We are not a country which need cold storage, right? There's no economics for there. And that's why we are not seen. Issue is never capital. Capital is always there. The issue is whether there's a fundamental need for product. So wherever there is a fundamental need for product is there, and the government is not the client, investors are open. But if the government itself is the client, then you see private investments doesn't happen generally. Yeah.
That's a really nice way to capture it. Thanks. Neeraj, back to you. You are quite a big player in the rainwater harvesting space, and I think largely in this whole at-source water space, you're quite a large player. What is the financing landscape expectation you have? Debt and equity both have a significant role in this for you to scale. Could you give us an idea on what do you think are the key needs that are required in this sector, and how have you looked at, you know, in whatever conversations you've had with financiers, how has that nature of conversations been? Have you seen them being receptive to it? Have they seen something like, I need the sector to grow a bit more? How has that experience been for you?
Uh, as an entrepreneur, you actually think about raising funds or looking out for investments only when you have successfully established the product, because the initial 3, 4, 5 years, you actually want to demonstrate your product and the offerings that you're going to deliver to your customer. Unless you do that, I'm sorry, there will not be any ask, or there will not be any interest coming out from investors. Now, coming back to your question, Shravan, debt versus equity. Debt, of course, will help you meet your kind of immediate, targets, which is like maybe delivering a project or meeting your yearly targets, or let's say running your operations smoothly. So debt will only help you that much. Whereas you would need equity, at least in our space, only when you want to come out with a new technology. So a couple of things which I just wanted to highlight here is, people talk about whether customers or investors has been receptive of your product or not. But I have a very different theory to it. I always say that unless you go and talk to the investors and talk to the customers about the problems that you're facing, nobody is going to extend their helping hand, because you have to. So you'll have to create that market first, bringing that kind of an opportunity in front of the investors and the customers both, and then only you'll start seeing a lot more action in this field. So when we started, trust me, there were industries, customers like Tata Steel, Reckitt Benckiser. They only came back to us asking for better, innovative products, and then they extended their help also. Similarly, the same thing has happened with our investors as well. I mean, we have been recently got funded by New Fund, and I would say we have been very, very lucky to have them on board, because they understand this space quite well. Most of the people working at New Fund understand infrastructure, B2B business, and as Shailesh rightly pointed out, if your customers are not government, and if there is a very clear visibility on the revenue that you are bringing in, trust me, most of the investors are going to have an interest in you.
Super. And congrats. Great to hear about the raise. To both Tracy and Shailesh, you guys can choose how you want to take this up. These are all sectors where part of it is about scaling what is available, what is in place, like what Neeraj is doing, and also investing into new things which are coming in. How do you see the main priorities that need to happen in scaling water investments, either from a policy perspective, a technology perspective, or a market perspective? And you can take it from your own lens. But how do you see the next coming years looking like? Yeah. Right. Either of you can take it up first.
I think I want to talk to a different area for especially that is true not only for water companies but almost all deep tech engineering companies. Compared to a software product, it takes much longer time to build a hardware and water companies, everything.
Yeah.
And I think that's where very essential, especially the policy can play a large role, is to enable the grant environment. I think the kind of time you take 3 to 4 years, basically for a startup from TRL1 to TRL7, the journey, that cannot be taken by risk capital, right? That is equity return capital. That can only be taken by grants or government labs.
Yep.
And I think that's where the need to create a policy where the grant to a for-profit company can be allowed, right?
Yeah.
Rather than worrying about that the 2% of the people will steal that money or 10% people will steal the money to their own companies, we should worry in the larger role that whether 90% startup should be able to raise either matching grants or some part, like say I'm happy to put a risk capital for this company, but probably you need some component should come from the grant because
Yeah.
they need to put up labs, they need to take a much longer gestation period, right? We cannot compare these hardcore engineering sectors at par with the food delivery company.
Yeah.
Or thing. So it's a very, very essential part. Globally, it has happened, and I think in India we have to do that because there the laws are very, very strict, right? You cannot take grant from the US. You cannot outside the FCRA kicks in. In India, the corporates are not allowed. So I think if this part can be taken care of, and there's no cost to government, we are not asking government to give us fiscal incentives, right? There's tons of money which is there sitting on the side, which can come if the startups are allowed to take grants.
Okay. No, that's a really good point. Excellent point. Tracy, yeah.
in my opinion, startups today are getting grants from the government. There is quantifiable amount of grant that is, or lower cost of equity that is available from the government side. The challenge that we see with working with so many startups, maybe not majority of them we invest in, but we get to work because of our work at the incubator, is that their ability to scale once they have done the prototype and validation, and how do they grow. So sometimes we are able to support, but beyond a certain point, it's beyond our ability to also support these startups. But in case of water, in case of if it is for portability, we are looking for technologies which are at cost comparative with what's, if 2 rupees per kiloliter is the, price of drinking water, then the technologies that are coming out that should be innovative enough to also provide, at that similar cost, so that people mass consumption is possible. And also like not centralized technologies, but more looking at decentralized approaches in which, different kind of partnership models can be built and scaled up in case of access to quality drinking water. And other than that, gray recycling, etc., we are looking at, as I mentioned about that, different kinds of biotechnology companies, algal recycling that is happening now. So those are also, again, the technologies that we are looking at should be cost comparative. So, and so that's what, like, directly in terms of investing in water, we haven't been able to because of some of these challenges in terms of business model, scale, and validation that we couldn't find in these companies, but we are obviously looking for more.
Okay, super. Neeraj, I'll let you have the last word before the open house. Like, how would you look for investors to see this space? What would be or maybe a couple of things that you'd like them to look at the space like?
Couple of things. One, of course, you cannot compare a hardcore engineering firm with, let's say, a consumer firm, because we guys take time to build our product. There's a gestation period, so there is a need of developing that patience. That is one. Second is, there has to be a very timely intervention in developing your products as well. I mean, you cannot just help the companies with the investment. I mean, there has to be engineering support. There has to be design support. Yes, I mean, the capital will help you find right set of people to do that. But then there has to be much more than this. So these are, I think, a couple of things which is our ask from the investor. And as I said right in the beginning of my talk, was that in the next 2 to 3 years, at least this sector is going to see a very huge inflection point. There are a lot of interest coming in from domestic vis-a-vis international players, and this market is going to amplify.
Okay, super, thanks. Thanks for that. So I think we are done with all our questions from my side, and we leave it to the audience if you have any questions. Yes.
As part of our strategy on carbon assets, we also have water impacting assets. And what we are really struggling with is the unit economics, right? So the question is, you also mentioned cost effectiveness, etc. How do you figure out the cost, right? What do you compare it against? Do you compare it against municipal water? Do you compare it against bottled water? Do you compare it against tanker water? Because there's so many different price points. And so how do you make these unit economics work? How do you make it profitable, etc.?
I think which is their cost. So if a company has to buy tanker cost, so they compare with the Indra cost with the tanker cost, right? So not for individual, it's for every commercial entity has a water cost, and water is no longer free, and nobody gets it municipal power. So there is a regulatory cost as well as what you call their own buying cost, and that's what we compare with. And I think the unit economics are very favorable now.
Yeah, Tracy.
And also to add, like, if you also already have a technology, I think the discovery has to happen with the customer in identifying what is the comfortable, price they are, they are okay paying. So that discovery at the initial level will help you understand that whether it is making a differential for them to invest in the technology that, you're selling.
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you. I just wanted to focus a little bit on the ecological restoration part of it, right? So let's say we are in an environment that we are going through for Mr. Thumbside. The silos that get impacted are air, water, soil, etc. Right? So as water experts, do you work with air people and soil people to come up with
Neeraj, do you want to take this? You do.
The infrastructure that we are trying to create or establish does not only incorporate water. So there has to be a whole lot of study of the type of soil which is there, because the water is actually going inside the ground. When you're recharging it, you are sending back the water back to the source, right? So there has to be a proper study of the hydrogeological condition, and which kind of allows the people from different, you know, I would say different field of soil plus what kind of, you know, soil will allow percolation of how much to happen. So all that study is there. So yes, I mean there is a need of hydrogeologists there. Also people from energy sector, because there's a very interesting water energy nexus which we keep on talking about. If you see desalination plants, or if you see sewerage treatment plants, they cannot run unless there is a electricity there, right? So what do you do? I mean, you use water to produce energy, and then again use that energy to conserve water, or you kind of tap into the fresh source of water, which is rainwater and storm water, which otherwise goes down the drain. So you know that question is how efficiently you are going to address this problem is how you are going to make this business that big.
Okay, that's useful. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes, there's one back there.
Over from Exact Creative Fund. It was a great session. Thanks, Sharon, for moderating it. Firstly, we've been tackling with a few investment thesis questions. As far as the last 8 years for us, we've deployed quite a chunk in agriculture, in some bit of climate and ESG-related platforms, which are very novel, which are very high-tech. But recently, what has come to our interest is solutions which are off the shelf, which are an upgrade to existing RO, UV, Kent solutions. And the uptake of it from a community standpoint, as well as those solutions which are probably going to help expedite the use and the consumption and the reach of water supply, is a major miss amidst us as VCs and investors. So
Yep.
We're taking the blame of our share of contributions that we do in the startup ecosystem. But we recently started working with WWF as part of this study, and they do a lot of implementation projects. And I think one of the panelists had mentioned that understanding who the customers are, who the MSMEs, SMEs, what their mindset is crucially important. And while we started, doing this study and interacting with such kind of projects and these stakeholders, we realized that the need for such kind of solutions, both from a capital inflection point of view as well as a demand point of view, and subsequently the market, supply, everything, while it is very well policy aligned, there's some bit of a gap from a innovation or entrepreneurs picking up in upgrading those solutions, and not just spending towards AI and the space that was pointed out. While it is there and we actively invest in it, this is a space that we want to tap into, both from a say a subject matter expertise and research expertise that we want to build into, and have some kind of a deployment or a pool earmark, be it through a blended finance instrument or either way through private equity investment that we do. So I just wanted to hear the take of the panelists as to how do they feel for those solutions which are low grade, low tech, but the supply, the reach is still missing, and if there's any opportunity for you guys to use it, then we can definitely have a chat about that.
Especially, we need to look at this whole element on water access. And that is as simple as, can you just ensure, like you mentioned, any low-grade common solution, it just ensures potable, clean water to a person. Half the time it's because an infrastructure is not there. So right water, that's what they're doing at a community level in rural areas, where it's just about ensuring that infrastructure is available just to provide this in a way that at what's available. And I think that's always going to be the mix that we're going to find on, while you're providing access, when it's like RO-based, it's still a water guzzler, a lot of wastage which comes into it. And it also, I think, touches upon your question on, what do you give weightage to further? So there's one school of thought could be that we ensure access now, but then we figure out, okay, the cleaning up part can come afterwards once the infrastructure and the pipelines are built out, basically. So I would say basically it's really on what's the priority metric that you have. From an adaptation standpoint, you look at water access as a primary thing, but it has this negative effect wherein you're affecting water security potentially. But I'll let the others to chime in on that for sure.
So as a fund, we do not look anything which is not large, not scalable, not create mega returns. Let's be very honest and clear about that. So that is there. Coming to the community-based solution, everything else, it's a very complex area. I think I will give you an example. I think we have some 2 minutes there. So there's a story, right? So whole North India is very arsenic water, right? And with a lot of contribution, everything else. But you know why this problem started? This problem started when again World Bank said that we need to have a hand pump, right? And the hand pump got deployed. And then this arsenic problem started happening, and a lot of things happened. Then people figured out why it was like, say, I think 3-4 years people went back and they say why it was not there, say 30-50 years back. Then people realized that everybody was taking water from a well. And when you're taking water from the well, when you put that tumbler inside, it stirs the water, the sunlight comes in, and the arsenic gets oxidized and become iron ore and goes down, right? So water becomes clean. So a lot of time this technological intervention which comes from the outside destroys everything which is there, right? So we basically created a problem out of nowhere. The whole North India became the whole arsenic water thing, and then solutions started, the NGOs started, right? Everything started for a problem which was not there because the well has solved it out, right?
Yeah.
So the point is, I am very, very, so in the community base, everything else, especially when you do large studies, which somebody come from that come with a helicopter view and do that, it scares me. Like there's Professor William Sterley from New York University, and he said, the worst thing you can do in Africa is by giving the aid, right?
Yeah.
And that's what scares us.
Aid, yeah.
Because the communities know how to handle them.
Yeah.
Once some outside solution comes, it generally destroys, then cures. Yeah. I hope I have made my point.
Interesting point. Yeah.
I just wanted to add that as a climate investor, we are interested in technologies, in innovations. Obviously, potable water access is an area that is important to us, but it also has to be looked at it from a climate lens. So it shouldn't be that instead just to provide potable water, you're also wasting a lot of water, which is happening with RO. So those are the kind of technologies that we stay away from. So innovations that can help in climate innovations that can help in better access at a low cost for community drinking could be of interest to us.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think if you provide a solution just for another problem to arise, well, you're creating a new market perhaps, but it's not the most ideal thing. Perhaps I think one last question, if anyone has a question. Yeah. But I hope it was useful for all of you. And yeah, Ranjana, I think.
Thank you, Shravan. This was indeed a very, very thought-provoking and inspiring discussion. And what a wonderful panel to, execute it all for us. So this concludes our session, ladies and gentlemen, and we hope you find it as inspiring and insightful as we all did. It's now time to break for lunch, and we'll be back after an hour at about 2:25. Yeah, I think after an hour. During the lunchtime, I think I want you all to look at one of the solutions which Radisson Hotel has also installed outside. It's atmospheric water generator, which converts the atmospheric water into drinkable water. It's a small machine, but I'm just saying that the change probably has started happening as we speak. So yeah, enjoy your lunch and thanks for being such an engaging audience. So see you back at 2:20.